Hi. What we're going to be covering in this chapter is use of the CMS machine. What this allows us to do is get pertinent information for race setups and to be able to predict outcomes of different tire diameters and things of that nature. Some of the measurements discerned by this device would be the rake, the trail, the swing arm downslope, things of that nature, which are very, very useful in helping get a race set up and helping get stuff together of that nature in the high performance end of things. If anybody's ever come to you and said that they've changed from Metzler's to Dunlops and now their bike feels like it needs an exorcism, this machine would certainly explain that. So what we're going to do is show you how to use this. If you remember when we were doing the regular chassis measurement that you saw before this to determine whether or not the bike was bent or straight, we were concerned with if the dots were in the center of the screen. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this into a mode where we can monitor the relationship between the camera and the dots and actually pretend to start the measurement so that we can see what's going on with that. Okay, so now what we've done by starting the measurement procedures, that we know that the relationship between our cameras and the height of our dots puts our dots in the center of the screen to ensure that we're going to have a nice accurate measurement. So knowing that that's correct, it's okay for us to go to the next step, which would be to tighten down our CMS machine onto the shaft. This just mounts on the same shaft that goes through the swing arm pivot. And again, if you remember, we make sure that that's tight, that there's no slop in any of this. The next thing to do is to find out where the wheel centers are. And the back wheel, for the back wheel, it's very straightforward and easy. What we would do is we would simply loosen this top nut, slide this over, turn our laser on, and then we would be able to see our dot. So then what we need to do is kind of sneak up on this and have one piece tight, and we can see that we're just forward of our line a little bit. And there, that's just absolutely wonderful. So we can turn off our laser to save the battery. Then we can go to the front end. The front end's a little different, a little more tricky, because we need to make sure that the wheel is straight. And the way that we do that is we measure it with a tape measure to see that we have the same measurement from the front here. Roughly, sorry about taking so long. Okay, 13 and a half it is. So now that we know that the front wheel's parallel, and believe me, this guy's got his steering stabilizer on plenty tight to hold it there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to turn on our laser, and then we're going to creep up on getting that dot in the center of that center of that hash mark. So we're a little bit behind it. Okay, fantastic, so that's done. The next thing we need to do is go back here and double check our back one to make sure nothing's moved on the setup. And we see that we're just exactly where we wanted to be, so it's safe to say nothing's moved. So then now what we would need to do is we would need to enter these numbers on a sheet of paper so that we can recall them later. 46, here's my old man's kit. So the first thing we're going to look at is the rear length, and we see that it's 542 and a half is the rear length, and that's in millimeters. The rear height is 108. The front length is 873, and the front height is 123.2. Okay, we know that this year GSXR has a clamp offset of 32 millimeters. That's another question that's going to be asked. So we know that. The other thing that must be taken into account is the circumference of the wheels. And what we do is we have a tape supplied to you in the kit, and this is like a seamstress tape that fits around the circumference of the wheel. You can actually read it if it's right side out. And you slide this around the wheel, and you read the numbers on this, and then that would tell you the circumference and or the diameter, and from that you're able to know that dimension. So we're ready to actually measure this bike now. We have everything written down. As we know, we want to make sure that we can turn the bar to the left. Still have the dots on the screen. We've gone over all this. I'm not going to waste your time with it. Okay, so the regular frame measurement at this point is done. Now we're going to go to the CMS measurement. So for the CMS measurement, we're not concerned whatsoever with the double target bracket whatsoever. So we're going to just take this, loosen this up, and set this out of the way. What we're going to do then is we're going to take this arm, we're going to lift this up, and what this arm does is we need to slide this along this rail. And the purpose for sliding this along this rail, and it must move 250 millimeters or greater, the reason for that is that it actually makes it easy on us. We have all the values as far as the height and the distance of everything. The Max machine certainly knows where the center of this is, but by sliding this along, we're able to tell the Max machine the angle that this is relative to the angle of the bike, and so we don't have to spend any time leveling this up or any kind of anything like that. So we would use the single target. We put this in here. We see that we have a dot, and then the only question to us is, are we going to be able to move that 250 millimeters? It certainly looks like it. We're going to double check that everything's tight, which we know it is, and we're going to go ahead and proceed to the next step. So right now it's measuring this dot. And in that particular case, it measured it twice just to make sure it was what it wanted. So this thing, we know that 250 millimeters would be roughly 10 inches, so I always try to move this thing at least a foot. And you don't have to be precise about any of this. So we know we've easily moved this thing further than 250 millimeters. We're making sure that this isn't in a way or fouling that in any way. So then we go and we tell it to measure, please. And it's measuring that dot. Okay, so that part of it is done, and now it's time to enter the data into the computer, and so we'll move the camera so you can see that. So we would go to the results. From the results, we see that this is the same measurement for this bike that we've seen before. We would go to the CMS measurement, and it would ask, the first thing it would ask for is the circumference of the front wheel, which is 1905 millimeters. We would hit our tab button. The circumference of the rear wheel is 2020 millimeters. Our front height on this is 123. Hit our tab button. Our rear height is 108. These are from the measurements you saw me take a minute ago. Rear height would simply be a reference for a later time, but we don't care to enter that in at this time. Distance front is 873 millimeters. Hit our tab button. Distance rear is 542 millimeters. Our clamp offset is 32 millimeters, as we know. This over here is a formula or a calculator to allow you to measure the tube's width. A caliper. We don't need to do that. We've known for years that these clamps are 32 millimeters. And here's our bike with our measurements. The delineation of the bike's geometry with the rake number, the trail number, the wheelbase number, the swing arm downslope number, different measurements of that. And what we can see is the reason why this thing is nervous and shaking its head on the faster part of the tracks is because this 98.5 number should actually be at least 101, 101.5. What we know is that the fork tubes are flush on his bike, and so that the only option that leaves us is to lower the back of the bike to make this bike more stable and less easy to turn, but more stable and less head shaky. So we would go to our simulation page. Let me move this to the center for you. Okay, so we're in our simulation page now, and this is the page that allows us to make theoretical changes and see their effect on the bike. The one we're interested in is the rear height of the motorcycle. So we're going to go to there, we're going to get rid of our 0, and since we know that the 98 number is less than 101 like we would like, we're going to go ahead and put a minus sign in there, and we're going to just guess at 8 millimeters and see what that does for us. And that in essence makes this just about right, maybe not quite what we would want, so we'll try 10 millimeters. So we would go 10, and then we would ask it to calculate that out, and that gives us about what we want. We've lost quite a bit of swing arm downslope, but our trail number is now right at 101. We might want 101, 101.5. Let's see what 12 does for us. And this is a great idea right here. This is a real nice setup for him, and this bike will be a lot more calm and stable and allow him to get on the gas a lot harder through the fastest parts of the track. And that's how the simulation pages work. The other things you could change are the length of the swing arm if you adjusted chains, tire circumferences, if you change tires. If I put Michelin's or Dunlop's on this bike, we could change that and see what it is. The height of the front fork, if we were to move that up or down in the clamp, that allows us to change all of those things and see the reaction to the chassis of those items. So that's what I wanted to show you. So it's clear that we should lower the back of the bike 12 millimeters and remeasure it to just to double check everything we did. Very good, thank you.